Professional situation of Spanish journalists, repercussions of the crisis on the media. The professional situation of most Spanish journalists has worsened since the beginning of the 2008 crisis, while the problems of the media increased dramatically in 2012. The cuts made during this period are the most drastic of the past 20 years and affect all elements of the reporting process. This is one of the main conclusions drawn from a research study coordinated by Professor José Suengas of the University of Santiago de Compostela. The study analyzes the professional, labor, and economic conditions faced by Spanish journalists during the past 5 years, a period in which the crisis and the media convergence coincided with the digitization process. To understand the characteristics of the current media scenario, the study involved interviews with journalists from TVE, Antena 3, 4, Telecinco, La Sexta, Cadena Cope, Cadena Ser, Onda Cero, RNA, ABC, El Mundo, El País, La Razón, and La Vanguardia. Thus, the study takes into account the country's main public and private communication channels, the 3 types of traditional news media, print, radio, and television, the different editorial policies of each medium, as well as their distinct business and information gathering models. In addition, other media experts were interviewed to contrast the information provided by journalists and provide a complementary and external assessment of the state of the news media. The research shows that in the restructuring of the newsroom, financial concerns have prevailed over journalistic guidelines and newsworthiness, which are no longer the only factors that determine what events are covered, according to 54% of the public media journalists interviewed and 65% of private media journalists. Production costs are very influential now. The information gathering policy of the media is conditioned by cost-saving measures and profitability. Investigative journalism is the biggest loser as a result of the media's reliance on information provided by third parties, such as institutions and news agencies, as well as the popularity of sensational tabloid news stories that guarantee an audience and save money. 87% of the sample of media outlets have reduced their staff or the material resources traditionally designated for news coverage. 62% of journalists have seen their purchasing power decrease since 2008, and 33% of staff writers fear they will lose their job, while this percentage increases to 54% among journalists over the age of 50 and to 68% among freelancers. All the analyzed media have changed the structure of their newsrooms over the past 5 years. The newly implemented guidelines and rules, which have been designed to enforce cost-cutting policies, significantly change how daily tasks and responsibilities are distributed among writers. Now companies are betting on versatile journalists rather than specialists, a move which endangers the traditional jurisdiction and autonomy of individual departments and calls into question professional reliability and standards for reporting. The structural and organizational changes that have taken place in the media in the past 5 years have increased job insecurity and have affected journalists' independence and freedom of information, as well as labor rights and the diversity and quality of content. These setbacks favor censorship, manipulation, and the control of news content by people in sectors outside the field of journalism. In addition, with the rise in temporary contracts, the increased ability to enact mass layoffs due to insolvency, and the outsourcing of many services, journalists have become more vulnerable because their work is conditioned by a power structure that creates a permanent state of dependence and instability. For this reason, writers have lost power and autonomy to corporations and have lost authority with their information sources, especially those that have political or economic connections to the media. The media outlets that have managed to survive the crisis have lost operational capacity and are now in a situation of economic and political dependency that hinders their autonomy and threatens the stability of the press unless structural changes are made. When public funding is requested, subsidies become a way for the government to control information, since the allocation of money is almost always associated with conditions that affect the work of journalists. The interviews conducted with media experts identified the key elements responsible for the current situation of the press, including a media development plan based on expansionary policies, modernization focused on technological investments, and the consequent economic dependency derived from the requested lines of credit, as well as a commitment to solutions formulated solely from an economic perspective and a failure to consider less dramatic alternatives. Another problem faced by the Spanish media today is related to the evolution of how information is produced and consumed, specifically the migration of a large part of the audience to the internet, which has exacerbated the crisis for media organizations reliant on traditional means of communication. This situation also creates a gap between large media conglomerations with access to capital and smaller companies that lack financial resources, which results in a monopoly of information that affects the diversity of the information supply.